Episode of the Hashtag Kangaroos podcast. Here is your host, Dean Masich.
G'day everyone and welcome back to the Hashtag Kangaroos podcast. I'm Dean Vassy. You find me on X at Hashtag Kangas, Instagram, Hashtag Kangaroos podcast. Tonight's episode is all about unpacking Friday night's heartbreaking loss to Collingwood at Marvel Stadium. It was one of those games that left North Melbourne supporters with mixed emotions. The result stings because the Roos were in a winning position late in the game, but at the same time, there was plenty to like about the performance against one of the AFL's benchmark sides probably over the last 5 years, even though they are around the mark where we are. But joining me to break it all down is a good mate of the show and one of the voices behind the North Pod show, Jason Hunt. Jason, welcome. Let's start with your overall reaction to Friday night. Was it a game North let slip, or did you come away feeling like I did, like that this performance showed the club is maybe heading in the right direction a little bit?
Well, thank you for having me on again, Dean. It's always a pleasure to be on. I think like a mixture of what you've said there. We definitely did let it slip. You know, we were ahead late in the game, and we were right. It was there for us to win. You know, like it's not one of those games where a couple of things went against us and there was bad luck, and all of a sudden we find ourselves completely out of it. Like it was ours to win, and so we did let it slip, which is frustrating. But I think, you know, based on the way that we'd been playing recently, I was pretty happy with, the way we played, even if you certainly would like a more favourable result. There's some good performances, I think, from a few individuals that maybe haven't been shooting the lights out. Like I thought Zurhaar's game down back was really good, and you know he's been up and down recently. I thought Tristan Xerri had a really good second half, and you know he's found it hard to sustain his impact. So I think, you know, overall it is certainly disappointing to not come home with the chocolates, but I think, you know, realistically as North Melbourne fans, we're probably trying not to get too tied up in, you know, the individual game results this year, and just hope that we collect a few more wins as the year goes on and we end up, you know, out of the bottom handful, which at the moment is looking okay. Mixed feelings for me coming out of the game, I think.
A lot of what ifs. Like if Jack Darling kicks a goal in the last quarter, do we hang on? Yep. Was it a 5-day break? We probably missed some late tackles as well. We probably looked like we did fatigue probably last 5 or 6 minutes. So there's a lot of what ifs, and at the end of the day, those games can go either way. And maybe with a bit more experience, a bit more composure, we may hang on and win those games in the future. So, but I was more encouraged by this performance, and it sounds strange, even when we won 3 in a row, I was more encouraged by Friday night than I was when we won the 3 in a row and the Port Adelaide game, Jason. Is that a stupid thing to say? I just felt like, we're playing more proactive on the weekend rather than actually, being reactive, going backwards, sideways. It just felt like it was very boring football. I know they want to work on their defence and not conceding big scores like they did for a 6-week period during the course of the season. Alistair Clarkson has said that. But I was more encouraged by this. And, I guess it's just getting that balance a bit better, isn't it?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the games that we won, you know, that Essendon game was an awful game to, you know, in terms of the skill level and whatnot. Like it wasn't a game that you looked at and were encouraged by in terms of the future. And the Richmond game wasn't much better. So I tend to agree that, you know, the way that we played, I thought we played with some dare. Our defensive structures against Collingwood were probably a little bit lacking. Like Collingwood found it very easy to take it end to end, and if they won centre clearance, our one-on-one defence wasn't fantastic, but I thought offensively there was a lot more positives that we could take out of the game against the Pies. And, you know, whilst they're kind of around the same spot on the ladder with us, I think, like you said off the top, you know, there's still some really good players there. Craig McRae is a fantastic coach. Like they're not a layup. Like it's not an upset in any way that we lost this game. So I was relatively encouraged, particularly offensively. Our finishing has some work to do. I think that's that's a pretty obvious one. But the way that we moved the footy and created opportunities, I think, was a real positive.
No, definitely. Now, it's been a while since you were on last time. I think the last time you were on, we had that good comeback win against Gold Coast. Yes. So that's going back a number of weeks. The back line is generally a big talking point each week. How do you see the mix? How do you see the mix right now? Aiden Core has come in for Logue since then. Zerha is regularly playing defence for most weeks. Like you said, he had a really good game Friday night. I haven't been a big fan of his probably going back there for the majority of the season, but you can't argue with his game on Friday night. Cooper Harvey's come into the team. McDonald, Daniel, Luke Parker, Hardiman, Goda seem to be around the team a lot as well with Comben. Have we got a defensive mix that can take us forward now, Jason?
No.
I was trying to be optimistic.
No is the simple answer, but I think there are parts that can take us forward. You know,
What do you think we're lacking?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. I definitely think, to state the obvious, we haven't found someone to put next to Charlie Comben that is the number one stopper, because I think Chom is best if he's second or third banana, and at the moment, really, he has to play either he's playing on the best, or we've got Logue or Core playing on the best, and they tend to get beaten, generally speaking. I don't think I would have thought that the way that we've drafted, we were looking at either Whitlock or Shoddy Dawson to be that number one defender, one of them to become that. And at the moment, neither of them are looking like that. I mean, Dawson's shown signs, but we're experimenting with him mostly in the ruck at the moment, and he was omitted this week. So, look, I definitely think we are still missing like another good key defensive tool, and someone that can play a real shutdown role. And then, I think we have to hope that someone like Hardiman comes on. Like he's that perfect, he plays a really good defensive game, but he also has some great run and carry, some great penetrating kick. Like you need those mid-sized players that can do both. So hopefully Hardiman comes on, but he's found it pretty hard, through injury and form to get in. Cooper Harvey is a fascinating one for me. Like I'd love it to work out for him. Like I would. I think there's not many North fans that wouldn't like it to work out for him. I can't help but think that we're giving him this spurt here as a bit of a final chance, as opposed to it being he's completely earned it on merit, and we think he's solidified his spot. Like I don't see what he's doing that plenty of players couldn't do. Like a lot of his kicks are just long bombs. Under pressure, like he's not a McKercher that's hitting darts coming out of defence. So he's an interesting one for me in terms of is he that one where we're giving him a final shot before we decide what to do? I don't know. But yeah, we probably need that balance isn't quite right yet in terms of having enough really good key defensive tools. And if you look at us playing Caleb Daniel and McKercher and Cooper Harvey down back, there's really three that struggle to defend. I don't think you can play all three of them and be a strong, back six, back seven, because realistically, neither of those three can defend for various, whether it's they don't have the ability, they're too small, whatever it is. So there's definitely some good parts there, but I think there's work to do. How do you see it, Dean? That's a lot of me talking about it.
I don't mind Cooper Harvey that he's coming to. His best position is a forward, but he's never going to get a game there at North Melbourne. I said this a few weeks ago. I said I think he's got to look at other options for his future at other clubs. Because if the club comes in, apparently Essendon and a couple other teams are really keen on him. And if a club comes in and gives him 2 or 3 years, and North Melbourne offer him 1 year, then he's got to consider that. And like you said, he's probably if he plays a poor game, he's probably out of the team, and that's it. He's doing enough to keep his spot in the team. I don't mind it. His skills are quite good. He generally hits targets. He's a different type of player to McKercher, and he has improved his one-on-one defensive work, but we're almost fitting a square peg in a round hole with some of these players. I prefer Goda and Hardiman. I like their upside a lot more, but I'm happy for him to get a game. Aiden Core's come in. He's done a decent job. It would be nice to get a key defender, to be honest with you. Aiden Core's 32, but at least he gets a body on his player. Griffin Logue just lets his player float around. He tries to read it in the air. Zerha I'm still not sold on. So, yeah, there is a few flaws there, that's for sure. But, you mentioned Will Dawson. Have you been surprised? Like, they haven't played him in the VFL, they've played him as a ruck as well, with very minimal game time as a backman, mainly playing as a forward. On the weekend, it was a curtain raiser, he did play as a defender. So that's the first time I've seen him there this year, play regularly as a defender. Have you been surprised they haven't try to develop him there instead of playing him 25% time of ground as a third ruckman for the games he has played in the seniors?
Fascinated. I'm sure there's some method to the madness, but I just don't know what that method is. I think, we saw glimpses last year of what he can do playing as a key back. And absolutely, like there's some, he made some poor choices and he got found out a few times last year, as any young key defender is going to. But I thought I saw enough promise there that, he can do something. I remember he played a really solid game on Sam Darcy last year as an example. So I'm not clear on what they're trying to do with him. I'm sure there is a method, but I just don't know what it is, because I can't imagine that they're seeing him as a long-term first ruck option. I think, we've got Tristan Sherry doing that, and then you would imagine that Goad is the one that we're going to work towards beyond that. So I don't know whether it's a conditioning thing, whether it's just a way that they can slot him in and get some AFL game time, and they don't see him as ready for a defensive position in the AFL yet. I really don't know. It's kind of similar to Whitlock. Different, he was playing forward on the weekend. But I'd love it. They have no obligation to, but it would be nice for the club just to say, hey, here's what we see Will Dawson and Matt Whitlock doing long term, so that we can at least be clear on that, on the plan. Because I think as fans, we are confused about what we're trying to do with those two young players, given the amount we invested in, particularly Whitlock. Like, it's a heavy investment. So confusion is a good word to describe how I'm seeing the Will Dawson situation.
I couldn't agree more. We don't know what's going on there. And what's interesting, like the press conferences, they never mention it. They never mention, how come Will Dawson? I don't know, maybe they're not as educated as full-on North supporters, and we notice it, that Will Dawson's playing in the VFL, he's playing as a ruckman. Then he comes to the seniors, plays 25% time on ground as a ruckman, as a third ruckman. That's it. That's his only role. So, yeah, I don't know why the question's never really asked to Clarkson. Hey, what are you doing with this guy? What's his long-term future? He's out of contract at the end of the year. Are you guys keen? Where do you see him in 5 years' time? And that's why you've got to ask your questions with a lot of these players. Where do you see him in 5 years' time? What position do you see him in? Yeah, it's very cloudy, like you said.
Yeah, and I think, if I had to guess, I would imagine it's much harder to get sort of to rotate minutes through key defenders. And so I imagine if they're saying they're playing, Charlie Condon and we're playing Aiden Core as our big two key defenders, and then, maybe Luke McDonald's playing on the third, or Zerha's playing, like whatever it is, like if that's what they're doing, I'm sure it is more difficult to rotate minutes through someone like Will Dawson if he is playing some ruck minutes and then he's going to play some key defensive, because we know, like, typically those key position players might come off the ground once or twice a game. So I understand that from a logistical point of view, but I'm sure there are more creative ways that we could try and get Will Dawson some AFL minutes, other than, like you say, spending 75% of the time on the bench and then having a few ruck contests where we don't necessarily think that that's where his future is. It's probably one of the... I remember way back in the day where there used to be AFL media, like AFL.com.au journalists that were assigned essentially to clubs. Yeah. And
Mark
were
McGowan did it, yeah.
Correct, like essentially experts on that club, but not, they didn't work for the clubs. And they were able to ask these kind of questions because they did have the intimate knowledge. Like, it's not reasonable that most journalists are going to know all 40-odd players on a list and where they're at. And so you're not going to get those kind of questions. But you're right. I think these are the sorts of things that certainly fans are wondering about, because, like we said, it's a big draft investment in both of those players. And I think as fans, we're confused as to how they're being managed or developed.
Yeah, definitely. We'll keep moving forward because we've got plenty more questions probably than answers for the back line at the moment. We'll go to midfield, and it was good to see Sherry have more CBOs on the weekend and was back to his best. 23 CBOs, only 6 for Trembath this weekend. No 3 ruckman, having 25% time on ground as well. How have you seen his last few weeks? I mean, the Pies scored 25 points to 6 from centre square clearances, and we outscored the Pies by 19 points around the grounds in stoppages. It balances a little bit there. But have we gone too far left with playing Trembath as a CBA ruckman too much lately? Or you been happy with that? Because he does have a good leap, and he does do hit-outs to advantage, but have we just gone a little bit too far, not counting Friday night?
Yeah, I think they're still trying to figure out what the right mix is by the looks of it. And I know a couple of weeks ago, Clarko made the point that, Tristan Xerri was not getting as many ruck minutes because we're hoping to protect him and make sure that he can play the rest of the year. I think for me that says that he's carrying something. Like I know he had that, was it broken jaw or whatever it was that happened a few weeks ago. For me there has to be something else going on if we're playing 3 rucks. Like it's crazy to play 3 rucks in my opinion. In terms of the Trembath Xerri balance, I really like, and I didn't think I would at the start of the year, but knowing now what the rules have done to the game, I really like the idea of having Trembath literally just do the CBA and then get out, which I think we've seen sometimes. And then obviously there's going to be times where Xerri legitimately needs a rest and Trembath does a short stint in the ruck, and that's fine too. But we got towed up for the most part in the centre clearances, like you mentioned, and he just can't. Xerri just against particular rucks, he can't jump, and there are games where it doesn't matter because their midfield's going to shark the ball anyway, and so it's not. We know the hit outs are not the end of the world, but if you're coming up against a really good tap ruckman, I think we're better off having Trembath in there so he can get that big leap. He can give our midfielders more of a 50-50 shot because we know that around the ground, Xerri's he's gonna monster whoever he's up against, generally speaking. I think for the most part, unless you get like an immediate repeat stoppage in the middle of the ground, I'd like to see Trembath do the ruck, and then if they can manufacture ways for that swap to happen as fast as possible, I'd love to see it. I know it's not, like what we're talking about with the defensive rotations. It's imperfect science, right? Like if there's an immediate clearance and it goes towards our opposition's end of the ground, it doesn't make sense necessarily for Trembath to then start running to our forward line to swap over with Xerri. Like it's an imperfect science, but I think in an ideal world, that's what I'd love the balance to look like. But I think we're still working through it, clearly, because it seems to be a different look every week.
No, definitely. Now, I've got a question for you. Then we've got Melbourne this week against Max Gawn. Yep. What's the mix? Trembath mainly in their CBAs to compete with Max Gawn in the air. Probably more of more 50-50 going that way. And then you've got Cozzy Pickett in the middle as well. Do we have to keep a close eye on him and then try and nullify Max Gawn? Because a lot of, they still do rely a fair bit, Melbourne, on that 1-2 punch in the middle. So, or do you think we try Xerri and maybe try and compete him physically in the CBOs? I'm not too sure because, he's quite good when the ball goes to ground, Xerri, because he plays as an extra midfielder.
Yeah, this is where I might even just contradict myself. The trouble with Max Gawn he's such a good ruckman that I reckon he'd figure out ways to negate Trembath's jump pretty quickly.
That's what I'm thinking too.
So I think, you're still going to have Trembath in there for little bits to give Xerri a rest. But I think in this instance, you probably have to try and rely on Tristan Xerri more than maybe you would against, say, Darcy Cameron on the weekend, who he's a fine ruckman, but he's not, an elite ruckman. I think that's where you're probably going to have to rely a little bit more heavily on Tristan Xerri, and it might mean that you give up a bit in the CBA, but you're sort of banking on the fact that, like you said, Xerri's going to be pretty good at ground level, and he's going to certainly be a much more physical opponent for Max Gawn to play against. You mentioned Cozzy Pickett. I mean, I'd love to see Finn O'Sullivan go to him like he has, for several players this year, and don't play a complete shutdown role because you're not going to shut down players that are dynamic and as quick and smart as Cozzy Pickett, but learn from him and just follow him around and try and negate little bits of his game. I think that's the best way to go about it. I think Foster's done a pretty good job of that across the year when he's had that assignment. But it's going to be a tough matchup. Melbourne have been, for the most part, pretty good this year. They've had a couple of down games, but they're a pretty dangerous outfit. So it's a big game for Xerri and Finn O'Sullivan and a few of our players to measure themselves up against some really good players.
Well, they can't play outside of the MCG, Jason, so we should be a good chance. We'll be back on track. Now, you mentioned Foss. He seems to be getting the run with Rolls most weeks. David King said last week that it should go to Simpkin, which would free Foss. I disagree with Kingy on this and think that what they're doing with Foss will only make him a better player going against the opposition's best midfielder each week. Where do you sit on that?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think
Okay.
the fact that Finn O'Sullivan's getting these midfield minutes is fantastic. I think, we all knew it was going to happen. It was just when.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that it's happening this year is perfect for his development. And I think, like you said, that it's so great for his development. He's not playing, it's not one of those tagging roles where he's getting 8 touches and his opposition's getting 15. He's still finding plenty of the ball. It's not a complete shutdown job. And I think that balance is right, because we've seen that if you go a really hard tag, it just throws off your own midfield. The way your midfield works together, and that cohesiveness, I think, a little bit too much. Simpkin is an interesting one because we have seen him play a few decent sort of run with roles, but I do think that really limits his ability to find the footy when he does that. I think Finn O'Sullivan has a much better balance in the way that he plays it, and it's fantastic for his development. So I'd much prefer to see Foss doing those jobs when it makes sense for him to.
No, definitely. Yeah, Josh Simpkin, you mentioned there, had 32 possessions. Was pretty good on the weekend. Still does the odd turnover where you think, geez, what the hell is he thinking? The only turnovers he could really do. I was getting ready to tweet here, Jason, that if we won and he got 32 touches, I was going to tweet to Collingwood sort of saying this guy was not good enough for you, but because they were not on board, any of their supporters, with getting him in. But, yeah, like on the weekend, he had a few CBAs. He's been in and out of the midfield. He's either been on a wing, in the midfield. Have you been happy with his balance? And he actually, from a personal point of view, he does seem happy within his role right now, whereas probably 6 months ago, he was looking out and he wanted more CBAs and he wanted more midfield time, whereas now he's getting a bit of balance of everything at the moment.
Yeah, it's an interesting one to watch. Like, it's so fascinating how we have these players that, Luke McDonald's, I think, similar, where they come into leadership roles and for whatever reason, whether it is coincidence or it is the weight of the extra responsibilities that a captain has, it really has a negative impact on the way they play. And I think, Simpkins played with a lot more freedom this year. Absolutely, he still has those turnovers and poor decisions that he that he can make. And I think we've seen more of that in some games than others, but like you said, he had 32 disposals, 8 marks, 5 tackles, 5 clearances. Like he did enough.
9 scoring involvements,
like he did plenty, and I think we've seen he's had a relatively flexible role. Like you said, he spent some time in the midfield. He can play on the wing. He spent some time at half forward for various stages as well. He has a pretty flexible role, but it's no longer, and it hasn't been for a while now, that in and under Luke Davies-Uniacke and him in the midfield full-time role. I think this is the perfect... If he's happy to play this role, which it looks like he is, I think it makes perfect sense for him and for us, for him to doing it, because he's doing it relatively well most weeks.
No, he is. And, yeah, I think he's had a pretty solid year. A good 7 out of 10 year. Yeah, he still had some poor games, but I think a lot of players have had that. You're not a North Melbourne player if you haven't had some poor games over the course of the year. Look, I've been quite happy with him. Now, a player that probably never plays a poor game, and that's Harry Sheezel. It feels like he's stepped up to another level this year, and you would have to think he's a real hot chance for his third BNF in 4 years at only 21 years old, Jason. He might win 15 BNFs at this club the way he's going. He's unbelievable, isn't he?
He is, and I think it's the old... we've probably said this so many times about Shees, like, you just kind of take him for granted now, which is crazy to say about a player as young as he is, but you just know exactly what you're going to get from every week. He's reliable. I think, for the most part, he's playing a midfield role now and doing it really well. And I think for me, the thing that stands out about, beyond his play on the field, he speaks so well off the field as well. He's got a real honesty and openness and vulnerability, I think, about him as when he speaks, which is just so refreshing, because so many of these young players come in and they're either... wild childs with, Bailey Smith types, or they just are robotic and really have nothing to say. I think he's a really in between. You get stuff out of him, but he's got a really good head on his shoulders. So, I think it's not splitting the atom to say that I think he's a future captain of the club. But you're right. Like, it's just so easy to take him for granted, because he does it so consistently, so well every week. And we shouldn't take it for granted, because players like him don't tend to stick around North Melbourne very long.
No, well, he's re-signed a 6-year deal. He's
Yeah.
probably one of the highest paid players in the competition. Well, he's probably one of the best players in the competition as well. Had an outstanding game. Similar possessions he had a similar game in Nick Dacos, and they're probably good player comps as far as their careers go, and it was a very similar game. I think they had 28 touches each, the same amount of score involvements and so forth. So, yeah, we're very lucky to have him, and he's someone we're building a club around as well. And yeah, I don't want him to get the captaincy too soon because, like you said, the captaincy, it feels like the weight of the world goes on some of these players' shoulders when they do take the captaincy.
Yeah, it does.
So, yeah. I guess George Wardlaw is another midfielder that we've got high hopes for going into the future. And that probably pushes Simpkin outside the midfield a fair bit if he plays. But, he just can't seem to get his hamstrings right at the moment, can he?
No, he's a concern, and I think that's, you don't want to, you certainly don't wish injury on anyone, but I know when we're talking about re-signing him, that's always the risk, I think, for him is his body going to stand up? And so I would really hate to see a long-term deal put in front of him just for that reason. I think it sounds like the club's pretty confident that, they can put things in place and help him limit these types of injuries in the future. So, I guess all we can do is take their word for it at the moment and hope that over the next few years, injuries like this are less frequent. I think he's stayed pretty fit to this point of the year until this most recent injury. So, look, fingers crossed. But I think the challenge with him is he just has such explosiveness in the way that he plays. He has to really have perfect technique, and probably realistically, his recovery and his whatever he's doing midweek is got to be perfect too. And for me, it'd be really interesting to talk to get him to talk to some of those players that have had absolute durability over their career, like Scott Pendlebury and Brent Harvey. I know they're two easy picks given they're the two highest game players of all time, but neither of them have had any really soft tissue injuries. I think of Boomer. I know he broke his arm at one point, but in terms of soft tissue stuff, I don't think he really had any issues. And that's, I'm sure some of that's genetics, but I also know that players like that are doing a lot of stuff during the week that's helping them do that. So you'd hope that we're getting him to talk to those type of people, or at least getting him to work with people that are going to make sure that his recovery and his midweek stuff is up to it, because he's so explosive. It's only a matter of time. Like my hamstrings strain just watching him play.
Yeah, he sort of does have a weird running technique as well. He seems to have refined it a little bit, but last game he just overdid it on that one occasion. And I think the club's trying to manage his minutes and time on ground as best as they can, 60-65%, which is on the lower end for any AFL player. So there's not much more they can do, and you just hope that over the years he does get better recovery. I remember when he first got drafted, people were talking about his tree trunk legs, and he said, I've never worked on weights on my legs, which I found extraordinary, even at 17, 18 years old. That, his leg muscles aren't as strong, and you always got to work on strengthening your core and, your hamstrings, glutes and everything. So, it's I'm sure they're doing their due diligence and doing everything they can, and I'm sure people are working overtime to try and make sure he gets it right, because he is an important player for this football club going forward. There's no doubt about that. You mentioned the captain, and for the first time in his career, he looks a little short on confidence in front of goal right now, doesn't he? Three goals for on Friday night. Miss Amizi ones by his standards, kept hitting the post. I think he hit the post 3 times. So, they're fine margins, but missing some easy ones. And, it's not the first time on the weekend. It's been the last 3 weeks now, Jason.
Yeah, I've had to explain to my partner what the yips was, because Nick Nike certainly has it. It's interesting because I think, like you said, it's really the first time it's happened in his career. They were showing on the coverage on Friday night that, he, in terms of players, I think it was 300 goals was the mark.
Yeah,
like in terms of players that they've kicked that many goals, like he is the most accurate. So I think it's important to keep that in context in terms of he's had a bad couple of weeks, but we know he's good. What I really hope, and I'm sure is happening, is that he is doubling down on his technique rather than trying to fiddle with it, because You know, there are so many times where maybe someone that's less familiar with him looks at the way that he kicks for goal and goes, he's got to kick through it. You know, he's got to follow through. That's the problem. Yeah. And it's not what he does. You know, he has a technique that works really well for him. This is in his head. You know, he's missed a few, and now he's a little bit more unsure about himself. And so I have no doubt he just needs to kick a bag. He just needs to kick 4 or 5 straight, and then he'll be back to it. The challenging thing is, you know, how's he going to find an opportunity to do that over the next or the last bit of the season when we've got some pretty good teams coming up, but. Look, I have full confidence that his goal kicking will be fine. We could probably debate his impact on games in general since he's become captain. I think he's had a little bit. His season hasn't been as good as he was last year, for example. But I mean, this game, if you take the yips away, he had plenty of shots on goal. You know, like he actually had a really good game except for his finishing. Yeah. So hopefully he can, pardon me, do a bit more of that, and I think he'll come out the other side okay.
No, look, he did have a really good game. I think it was 10 or 11 marks. And missed some easy ones, but that's the way it goes. Unfortunately, it's probably happens to the best of them. It's like a golfer missing some easy putts all of a sudden after being having a really good short game. So look, certainly not too worried at the moment. He's getting a lot of scoring shots. He's had 1 goal 5. 1 goal 2 and 3 goals 4. So it's a lot of scoring shots. So that's the most important thing.
Exactly right.
Matt Whitlock came in for his first game of the season. You mentioned him before. How did you see his first game? He was a bit nervous early. Did a couple funny little kicks and so forth. One landed on Dylan Stevens' chest somehow. It was one of the worst kicks I've ever seen out on an AFL football field, but it worked out, so that's okay. But I thought he grew into the game, and his second half was a lot better. And I know that free kick he got for the head slam, that was actually a really good move, a good instinctive move to get the free kick and a goal from Nick Larkey. Luckily, he didn't hit the post there. But, I thought he grew into the game. How do you see him right now?
It's so tough,
him.
right?
Yeah.
I think it's tough just in terms of, similar to what we're saying with Will Dawson, like, I'd just love to know what the club thinks he's going to be. And it's really hard. I know he's obviously played plenty of VFL footy, but he came in for round 4 last year and I think was subbed out of that game, and then he played round 23 last year. So he really hasn't. I think he was the sub maybe in that game. So he really hasn't played a lot of AFL footy. I hope that we're looking at him as someone that could be a swing man, but I'm thinking and I'm hoping that we're looking at him as being a forward more often than not. In terms of what I saw from him, I think he's got some good instincts. I think he definitely has a frame that is going to fill out. You can see he's still got that real lankiness to him, but he's started to put on a bit of muscle. So I think if he fills out a bit more and is able to then hold himself when he's getting pushed under the ball, he got pushed under the ball pretty easily on Friday night, which is fine for a 19, 20-year-old that's still finding his way. I think he's got plenty of potential, but it's these key position players, you just never know. You look at someone like Logan McDonald, who, he's playing some okay football at times this year, but he's that Will Phillips draft. You just never know. Like some of the best key forwards, look at Nick Larkey, are really late picks, and those higher draft picks turn out to be not quite what they were when they were playing underage footy. So, look, you don't know, but based off what I saw I certainly hope he doesn't get dropped, is what I would say. I think he needs a couple of games now to sort of find his feet at AFL level, and then maybe we can make a bit more of a judgment on where he's at. I don't think we're making too many judgments on his long-term prospects yet, but it would be nice to see a good 5 or 6 game block and then understand where he's at with his footy.
Well, he may have a concussion from that tackle. They're still waiting to hear from that. I'm not too sure. I haven't checked too much today, but he may have a concussion, which, like you said, would like to get some continuity and get him 3 or 4 games in a row to really judge him by then. But if he's going to miss this week, then you probably have to think the week after he goes back to the VFL and probably plays the VFL for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
So, it doesn't...
hopefully not.
Yeah, no, I might look that up in a minute, actually. But small forwards is an area we can't seem to be getting the mix right. Costanti rested for bench. I don't think he was rested, just quietly, Jason. Banch a goal and 8 touches with 3 tackles. Spargo is a regular, but we can't seem to get that mix right. And I guess we have to hope in the future and probably next year that Lockie Doveston really develops, has a good pre-season, and he can solve our problem there, because we've got a lot of small forwards, but none of them are clicking at the moment, Jason.
No, I mean, except for Paul Curtis, who, he's a small that plays a bit taller.
Yeah.
I mean, it was great to have him back in and kicking 3 goals, but him aside, you're spot on. I think it's gonna be fascinating to see, in 5 years' time, what Nick Watson's become and what Zane Duursma's become, because we all know that we had a shot, we had the chance to take Nick Watson, and I think there were plenty of North Melbourne fans that wanted us to take Nick Watson, and we ended up going with Zane Duursma, who I think was seen as like the safer option at the time. He was a player that had more excitement value and whatnot. Anyway, we'll see. In answer to your actual question, you're right. The mix is not good. I think you're spot on. Constanti was just dropped. And that's okay. Like he hasn't been playing fantastic footy. He's been fine. I don't know if Zach Banch is the answer. He kind of. I mean, it's hard because he's so small.
And that's the problem. I fear for him because he is so small. Yeah,
he's so small, which it's a small forward, but there's small forwards and there's small forwards. To me, he screams the kind of guy that's just going to be a really good VFL player, Zach Banch. And I hope I'm wrong, but that's what I see when I see him out in the field. You kind of get that vibe. I don't know that he does anything well enough to be an AFL player. I think he does a lot of things okay for his height. And it's funny thinking about, we spoke about Cooper Harvey earlier in terms of, he's been playing backline all year, but his actual position is small forward. But he's another Paul Curtis type, right? Like he's a small forward that plays taller. So we just don't have those really instinctive crumbing small forwards on our list that can get a job done at the moment. Hopefully that's Doveston. Hopefully in a year or two, but it's a lot of pressure, for a bloke that, he's in his first year of footy and didn't shoot the lights out when he started. So I don't know where we go for our small forwards, because the difference between what our players do when the ball hits the ground inside 50 and what our opposition players do is night and day. Other teams are way better at hitting the right spot and crumbing, and we haven't been good at it since, I don't know, like Lindsay Thomas. Like how far back do you have to go?
Yeah. We haven't been a good team for a long time either, Jason, so we haven't had anything.
That's true.
18th for ground ball gets in the competition inside our forward 50. I think Jack Darling is leading that at 1.4, and Paul Curtis is next at 1.3 or something like that. So, it's not even the smalls. But I wouldn't mind giving Banch a good 3 or 4 weeks to see what we've got there before we make a decision on his future. He's out of contract at the end of the year, so every game could be his last when you think about it. So I don't know. Are you with me on something like that? I always feel like you always should give these players an opportunity to prove themselves, and if they're not good enough, they're not good enough.
I totally agree, and I think that's what I think they're doing with Cooper Harvey, to be honest.
Yeah,
and I'm okay with it, because I think you want to, if you're going to delist players, which we have to do, like there's going to be players off the list at the end of the year, you want to be sure that you're not letting someone go that was about to turn into something amazing. Or, a small forward is the kind of role, it's similar to being a key forward, really. I think being a really good forward at VFL level is tough, right? Like, because you're relying so much on what's happening up the ground. I think being a midfielder or a defender at VFL level is a lot easier to shine. If you're a forward, and particularly a small forward, and you don't have good key forwards to set you up, like it's hard to showcase your skills. So I think playing Zach Banch for a stint here just to see what he's got is worthwhile. I think we're probably doing a similar thing with Cooper Harvey down back. And then, there's players like Hanson Jr. I don't know, has he played a game this year? If he has, he hasn't played many. No. Like Ruben Stevens, I know hasn't debuted.
He actually looks all right, Jason.
We've got options in this last 6 weeks to to see what players have got, because ultimately we are going to have to make some decisions on a few in the not too distant future. So I think you've got to give them a go. If they're anywhere close, you've got to give them a go just so you can see. You don't want to gift games, but if they're playing well enough to at least give them a chance, I think this is the time of year to do it.
Yeah, I haven't mentioned Riv Stevens much in the reserves this year, but he has looked a lot better in the last 4 to 6 weeks. So, look, I mean, I don't think he's going to get a senior game anytime soon, but he's a player that they may give a 1-year deal to or put him on a rookie list next year just to see what he's got. But he has improved out of sight, that's for sure. But like you said as well, Jason, it's a very different level from VFL to AFL, and some players just aren't up to it, unfortunately, and that's just how it goes. Where would you like to see McKercher? I know he's floating around at the moment playing a high half forward. You did mention that he could go to the back line, I think, earlier, or you mentioned him in the back line. He hasn't played there much at all this year. We've pretty much put Zerha there. But, yeah, where do you see his future, like, let's say, in 4 or 5 years' time?
I personally would love to see him on the wing, to be honest. I think because the wing gives him that flexibility to, go to push all the way up to halfback and be a great linking option from there, and also means that he can go forward and kick those goals on the burst that we've also seen he's capable of. I mean, that being said, sometimes he just runs the whole pitch and kicks the goal from halfback anyway. Yeah. But I think long term, I think the best position for him is a wing that sometimes gets some more footy at halfback. Because to me, you just want the ball in his hands as much as you can. If you're playing a high half forward role, there's going to be games where you touch the ball 6 times and it's not your fault. Like that's just what a high half forward has to do. So I'm okay with us sort of experimenting with him and seeing what works. But I think, I think about whenever it was, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, when Bailey Scott had a really good year on the wing. I mean, he had a couple of good years, but there was a year there where I thought he was phenomenal on the wing. Bailey Scott's never been a great kick. He's a penetrating kick. But if you think about the amount of ball that Bailey Scott was getting, and then you replace that with someone like McKercher in terms of his capacity to kick the footy, like that's a really, really good footy player. So I'd love to see him on the wing and then floating into half back at times. But it's another one like this Whitlock and Will Dawson. You'd love to know what the club are thinking, and we don't know. Like, I'm sure there's a reason that we're playing at half forward, but I struggle to think that that's where they see him long term.
He's got a unique skill set that he can break a line. We don't have many of those players, it's fair to say, Jason, that someone can break a line. And when he is behind the ball, he's very good at getting metres gained. He's almost like very much a poor man's Nick Blakey, like he can run and charge through the middle and create space and give you a lot of metres gained. So, yeah, I'm not too sure. He seems to just be floating around doing his own thing at the moment. But
maybe he just rocks up every week and says where he'd like to play.
Yeah, he almost plays like a junior footballer. Look, just play everywhere on the ground. Don't worry about positions or anything like that. So, it's an interesting development. I agree with you. I think when he was drafted, a lot of people saw him as like almost an Errol Goulden type, a player on the wing. They can rack them up, and so they've never really tried it too long. I think they've tried it for a month and it didn't quite work, so they've gone to other positions and so forth. So, we'll have to wait and see. But, he is a dangerous player. We don't have many of those players that can break a line like he can. Now, I'm going to move to the reserves, and they played a curtain raiser on Friday afternoon, Jason. A 7-goal loss. Bailey Scott keeping up his good form in the reserves with 43 touches, playing right in the guts, Jason. Ollie Griffin, who kicked on an outstanding goal with 3 goals and 5 tackles. Great work rate from the young man. Dawson was playing key back, like I said. I think if Whitlock comes out, then Griffin has to be a chance to come into the team, Jason. I think he's done pretty well since he's come to the club.
Yeah, I won't say I haven't watched full VFL games, but I've seen some highlights in the VFL, and it's like it's the time of year where I'd go absolutely let's get him in and have a look. Like particularly if Whitlock is unavailable, I think you have to reward players that are consistently getting it done at VFL level, and I think since he's been drafted, I think he has done that. But Bailey Scott is such a fascinating one, isn't he? Like, he was a fantastic wing player. I think he finished top 3 in the best and fairest a couple of years in a row, and then it just disappeared for him. And I don't know whether that's the way that we were playing changed, whether he lost something in his game. But he's still clearly a fantastic VFL player. It's hard to see how he stays on the list long term, but I know he's been racking it up at VFL level. So. Yeah, it's so fascinating to me, and it's one of those things that we'll just never be able to really solve. Like how there are these players that can just absolutely shoot the lights out at VFL level, and then just go one step higher, and it's like it's like they haven't touched a footy before. Sometimes, I hope that doesn't happen with Griffin. I hope he gets in and it translates really well. But you just never know, do you? And I guess that's the thing. We won't know until we give him a go.
No, definitely. Well, Zane Dersma was okay on the weekend, but if you had to pick, like, let's say Whitlock comes out and they sort of thought, oh, it's either Dersma or Griffin, which way would you go? Because I think it would be worth just to give a Griffin a game, to be honest with you. His defensive work in the VFL has been quite good as well, as opposed to a Zane Dersma.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan. If a player gets dropped, which Dersma did, I'm not a big fan of bringing them back in after 1 week. Unless it's like, you've dropped a senior player because, they've done something silly, whatever, and you're dropping them as a disciplinary action. That's kind of a different story. If you're dropping someone based on form, I don't think keeping them out for 1 week really sends anything of the right message, because if you're doing your job properly, you're saying, all right, Zane, we're going to put you back in the twos, and this is what we want you to work on, and we want to see you develop that over a period of weeks before you come back in. I would hope that's what's happening. So for me, if someone needs to come in, I wouldn't like to see Zane Dersma come straight back in. I'd like to see someone else, and if that was Griffin, I'd be totally comfortable with that.
Tom Powell, third groin injury in his last 3 games, so he seems to be struggling a lot with that. But do you see him having a long-term future at North Melbourne past this year, Jason?
It's such a fascinating one, isn't it? Because there was that period there where he was, you could argue he was their second best midfielder some weeks. Not this year, but
no,
in the last couple of years. I know he's had a really wretched run with injuries, but it's also hard to see how he would have fitted into this side in the second half of the year anyway. So I guess in answer to your question, it's no. I find it hard to see where he's going to fit in. We know we've gone really hard at the draft for midfielders over the last couple of years, so we've got talent there. Whether or not they turn out to be long-term players remains to be seen, but we know we've got talent there. It's a hard one because he's got no currency now. Like, it's not as though we can fish him out and try and get something back for him. But I don't know. Like, I could see us offering him a short-term deal and hoping that he has a form spike and we can find a role, but ultimately, like, I can't see him playing in the back line, and he really didn't bring a whole lot in the forward line. Like, he kicked a couple of goals. He wasn't bad, but he's not going to solve our small forward problems. And good luck getting him into this midfield at the moment. So it's just hard to see where he fits in other than being depth.
Unfortunately, we've tried him in other positions, and outside of midfield, he hasn't really found a spot, has he?
No.
Like other players can adapt. Like if it's not working in midfield, they can go half forward, they can go half back, or something like that. Whereas he just seems to have struggled outside of playing midfield, hasn't he?
Yeah, and I guess that's so many players. The vast majority of mid or small size players that get drafted, have played midfield at juniors and underage footy because that's where the best players play. And so I think what tends to happen is a player like Tom Powell, he's never played any of those other positions. He hasn't really had to think about, minding a player defensively. He hasn't had to work really hard as a half forward that knows how to read the game in a really particular way. And some players can learn that, like you said, but I guess from what we've seen on exposed form, he really has struggled to translate or to learn those new skills and running patterns. So yeah, it's a tough one because he for me, he's an AFL standard player.
Yeah.
But I just don't know how he fits on this team long term, unfortunately.
No, I don't know either, unless there's massive injuries and he can come in. But it's interesting, they did re-sign him for an extra 2 years at the start of the year. And the second round 2 against West Coast, I think he had about 20 CBAs or something like that. I'll have to look it up. And after that game where we lost, probably a bad loss, he never went back really in the midfield after that again. I think he had 2 CBAs in the next 5 weeks after that. So I don't know if they blamed him for that loss against West Coast, but it almost feels a little bit like that. So, yeah, maybe if things were different, he might not have signed And if you knew, we all had a crystal ball, we'd all be geniuses. But maybe if he knew what was going to happen, then he probably wouldn't have re-signed and maybe looked at other options either year. But like you said, he doesn't have any currency either, so we can't really get much out of him. He'll just be giving him away pretty much. So, now Bailey Scott, 142 possessions in the last 4 weeks in the VFL. That's pretty good form, Jason, but... Yeah, I mean, you pretty much have to put a line through him, don't you? I mean, similar to Tom Powell, he's never going to get a game in the midfield.
No, I think it's one of those things where I think we just know what we're getting from him. He's wonderful depth there for this year. Is he contracted for next year at this?
No,
stage?
He's not. He's out of contract this
year. Yeah,
so
I can't imagine that we'd be signing him again. But that being said, I didn't think that we would sign Cooper Harvey this year. I really thought that last year was going to be his last. So you never know. But it's it seems as though his papers have been stamped, and we've said we don't think he's up to it. He's not going to take us forward. So he's banging down the door. Maybe another club might pick him up. But similar to Tommy Powell, there's no currency there, so it'll be a chance for him rather than a positive thing for us, I'd say.
No, definitely. A player that had 41 possessions less than Bailey Scott in the weekend in the VFL was Ben McKay. Jason, would you want to get him back on a cheap as a key defensive player? You pretty much get him for nothing right now.
Geez, form's pretty terrible, isn't it? I do think to myself, it's such a sliding doors moment because we got rid of Ben McKay, or however you want to look at it. He left, and we got Zane Dersma as a result. Indirectly. And I that entire period I did find to be confusing because we invested a lot of time in him, and he was just. He's been a long time behind Robbie Tarrant as that number one key defender, and then he came in and he played some pretty good footy for us, and he had flaws in his game, but. I don't think he was the root cause of our problems when we were at the bottom of the ladder. And since then, he's played a couple of good games at Essendon, but it's been a really shocking time for him. So he's not coming back, to be clear. But geez, it wouldn't hurt to have a player of his height and size in our back line at the moment, would it?
No, look, I'm surprised they don't put him back to the back line. No, they were talking about, I watched a bit of the VFL, I think it was Friday or Saturday or something. It might have been Saturday afternoon. And I looked at his stats and he had 2 handballs. He didn't get another stat after that either. That was in the last quarter. So I was a bit surprised. Like the commentators were saying, just put him back in the back line. It's not working. What are you doing with him? I think it was Tom Rockcliffe was saying it. So if you're going to re-establish some sort of a semblance of a player that he was 5 years ago, then at least put him in the position where he played his best football, not put him as a forward, where he's kicked one goal here and there in the AFL system. So I find it a bit bizarre what they're doing with him. They haven't helped him at all, and he almost looks lost in the forward line.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shocking system to be playing in at the moment, isn't it? That Essendon side, like it's hard to see what what they're doing, to be honest. Like playing Zach Merritt at halfback, I'm sure it's
well, he's gone as well. So.
I know, but like playing it, like what do you do? It's not helping the team playing with halfback. It's just not. Anyway, like good luck to him. Like it's nice that there's someone else in the absolute doldrums besides us. So, I do feel for Ben McKay from the perspective of, he's getting hung out to dry. He's taken the money. I get all that, but it's a tough spot to be in for him.
No, it definitely is. Look, he's getting $1 million, probably a lot more money than maybe me and you are, Jason, at the moment. So
certainly.
Yeah, to play VFL football, it's pretty sad to see where his football career has gone. Anyways, Jason, I think I've spoken to you long enough about what's going on in North Melbourne and Friday night's game. Did you want to add anything else before I let you go, mate?
No, not in particular. I guess the only thing is, we've got, like six games left. I think, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to say, or maybe I'm wrong, but I think a lot of the vibe from a lot of people I talk to is that North Melbourne should be making should be in the wild card. Like, not talking about what our run home looks like, because it's hard. Like, I don't think it's going to happen. But I think there are a lot of people that had that expectation on us. How do you see a pass mark for this season based on where we're at right now, do you think?
If we can finish off the season with another win or two, I think 9 or 10 wins would probably be the expectation we would have had at the start of the year. But just playing a bit better football. I'm not too worried about finishing 10th, Jason, to be honest with you, and getting this wild card and getting smashed first week. But if we can get 9 or 10 weeks and we play a better brand of football, it would be a big step forward, and I'll definitely take that as a pass mark and probably a 6.5, 7 out of 10. Just on that, where are you on Clarkson's situation before I let you go? Would you re-sign him right now if they said the season finished? Would you give him a contract extension for, let's say, two more years?
This is a tough one because this is where I really don't understand why clubs, because there's got to be reasons why clubs are so keen to get their coaches signed up, right? And I get there's stability. It's like you want to be able to say to players that you're trading for, hey, this is your coach for the next however many years. So those parts I probably understand a little bit less, and I find it harder to empathise with. For me, there's no reason to sign him. Like, I understand that it's gonna create conversations next year because he's going to be out of contract, and that's going to be the conversation that's bubbling along when we start poorly. But for me, it's like, what the alternative is. Sure, we give him a 2-year extension, and then we start the year 0 and 8, and then we sack him anyway, and we're paying him out. Like, is that any better? So no, I wouldn't be giving him an extension, but I understand the pressures that come with that, and so I think you've got to weigh up those alternatives. But like, realistically, if we were to re-sign him and then we start really poorly, I think the pressure still comes. So it makes no difference.
Well, everyone's doesn't have a contract when they go to work. Me and you, we don't have any guarantees. 6 to 12 months time and all that. Sometimes you just got to do a job, and that's not a bad thing to be uncomfortable. I guess the fear is that if he does go into next year and he's it just doesn't get a contract extension, he's going to rely too much on his veterans, which I worry about. He's just going to play Luke McDonald with Caleb Daniel. He's going to put the younger players behind because a lot of senior coaches, when they're under pressure, they rely on they go to the senior players. So that's the concern I do have. If anything, I'd probably only go a 12-month extension after next year. So I wouldn't go 2 more years. That's too much money, like you said. And maybe with a pay cut. He's on over $1 million a year. So, that's how I'd see it. But if he's not happy with that, so be it. Yeah, you go into it with one year left.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I totally see what you're saying there. Like, it becomes the goalpost shift, and he's just trying to win games as opposed to develop and win and whatnot. But I think if that's how we really feel, like, is he the right person for the job anyway? You know, like, because if he's the right person for the job, he shouldn't be worrying about that. He should be trying to do the best thing for the club, and I think he is, for what it's worth.
Yeah.
But if we were concerned that not signing him was going to change the way that he coached in a way that was detrimental to the long-term prospects of the club, then I think that would be a bit of a red flag for me. So, look, I hope that we don't re-sign him and then we have a blistering start to next year and then we go, great, we're headed in the right direction, let's talk about an extension. I think that's blue sky's perfect situation. But as we know with North Melbourne, that's probably unlikely. So we'll have to wait and see what happens.
No, definitely. That's why they pay the big bucks to Sonia and all that to make those decisions. But Jason, mate, thanks so much for jumping on the #Kangaroos podcast. Once again, I always enjoy our chats, and it's great to hear your perspective on where the football club is at. So thanks so much for coming on. I'll try and get you on soon again.
Thank you for having me, Dean. It's always a pleasure to talk North Melbourne, and hope to chat before the end of the season.
No, definitely get you on before then. To everyone who's tuned in, thanks so much for listening, for your continued support of the #Kangaroos podcast. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, don't forget to subscribe wherever you can get your podcast. Leave a rating, review, share the show with your fellow North Melbourne supporters. I'll be back tomorrow later in the afternoon. I'm going to get 1 or 2 AFLW players to chat about how they're going in the pre-season. Big year coming up for them, going for the 3-peat. But until then, take care, enjoy.